Unspoken Tears. My name is Dave Rogers, and I'm the host. And it is a great honor today to have a couple of guests from North America. From first, we'll start off with Mike Chapman from North Carolina, a childhood sexual abuse survivor. And welcome, Mike, and thank you so much for joining us and have a conversation today about a topic that has some heaviness to it, yet from the way that you've gone through the experience, I'm really happy to have honor to have you join us today to share some of your experiences and some of your strategies to have dealt with some of the experiences that you had as a child. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
And to start off, would you share a little bit about your story? I've watched a couple of your videos and read a little bit about your story, and I actually would like to thank you first of all for having the courage and the bravery to speak up and to serve. A big part of what you're doing right now is being of service, and it probably wasn't like that from the beginning. And perhaps share a little bit of your story and some of the steps that you've been applying to move forward.
Certainly. Let's see. I grew up actually in Oregon, and I my first memory of abuse didn't happen until I was an adult. Sexual abuse by clergy. I was 20, but a late bloomer, so I looked about 16. I was in college, and the minister of the church I was going to took an interest. Turns out he was a pedophile and liked teenage boys. I fit the profile, and I was an adult, so that made it even more appealing for him. So he uh, groomed me, and then uh, he then assaulted me sexually, wanting it to go further, touching places where he shouldn't. And once I realized, something inside me said no, and I got him to leave. Um, but that was the first memory I had. Then fast forward 10 years, I'm now married, moved to the East Coast, and after my daughter was born, I started to having more memories. I thought it was from the thing with the pastor. It really wasn't. But after getting help with support groups, I discovered that I had actually been molested as a child, abused as a child by my own father at what I thought was around age 3. Then um, started getting more help with that and all of the issues that come with it until about 2019. Uh, Before that time, I had no resources as far as getting paid therapy or anything like that. So I mostly just went through support groups to see what they might be able to offer me. And then, let's see, after that, 2019, HBO had a documentary on escaping Neverland, Leaving Neverland, I believe is the title, and the 4 hour special, and then a 2 hour Oprah special after that. And they talked about on like chat group, uh, that support group that was for male survivors of abuse. And so I went on that, and uh, I was just amazed. I learned so much about my own issues. And then within a few months, started seeing a therapist and realizing that, yes, not only had I been used by my father, it started much earlier, about 7 months old, until about the age of 5. And then he started trafficking me to other men in what they call boy swap events. And that continued till about age 8. And so since 2019, I've been in support groups and therapy. I have a PTSD trauma therapist now that's been helping me tremendously with all of my issues, and discovered husband material. They've been helping with some of the sexual addictions I experienced, and also more healing of that sexual brokenness. And after going so far, they actually uh, asked me to become a life coach for them as well. So I'm a coach for them, and also my own business, Fuller Life Consulting, and helping men with sexual brokenness. And it's uh, an honor to be able to share what I've learned with other men and helping them on their recovery journey as well.
Mike, that is a incredible brief bio of your experiences. And I guess my question would be, what did you find as the biggest challenge that you had to deal with the journey? Because there's so many emotions and different experiences and a real curiosity you brought to it. What would you say if somebody's watching this perhaps for the first time and perhaps has some anger or addictions or shame? What were your challenges and what were some of the ways? I think you shared a lot by your pursuit of looking for support groups and going and being a student and really being whole and honest to yourself. What do you see as the challenges for people to really engage the experience and also start the healing?
Right. I think the biggest obstacle is that, like you mentioned, shame, that feeling that I must be dirty, I must be worthless because that's how I was treated. That's how my body was treated. And that's kind of ingrained in the back of your head. You're worthless, you're nothing, because that's what the perpetrators wanted you to believe. And that gets stuck, and you just feel dirty. You feel so much shame, so much having lack of value, that to reverse that curse and learn what it means to be comfortable in realizing that the abuse was not my fault. It was not my fault at all. And to really understand that. And in all of my self, it's been a huge battle. But getting through that, it's a huge relief because no, I'm not dirty. And I'm also a man of faith. I attended a men's retreat that they deal with all kinds of men who have whatever issues, recovery issues or whatever, and they go down deep. But they, some of the men kind of prayed for me and gave me this feedback, which then I put, and a kind of a vision. They had a picture that I made into a little poster that I have. Let's see if we can, yeah, that looks good. There we go. He has washed you clean forever. You don't need anything else, and his word is final. That concept of a waterfall and me at the bottom of the waterfall, just getting clean and realizing I'm not filthy, dirty rags, and that I do have value, I do have worth, just spoke to so much of me. And so I have that there as a reminder, just that I'm not dirty. And yeah, it's just helped tremendously to dig down and confront with healthy curiosity all of those issues that I have and why I have the sexual addictions and so forth, why those are in there. And it's because my body's trying to process that trauma.
Wow, for some people who might be watching this for the first time, I believe it could be the lights on for people to hear you speak with such compassion, self-care, that you've gone through experiences that are some of the most horrific for people to go through, yet you've brought in this self-discovery, this self-care, this compassion. And I congratulate you and I thank you so much for sharing, and I wish you continued power and strength and bravery to share the message of your journey and then assist others. I'm going to shift the gear a little bit from the personal experience to a gentleman who's involved in human trafficking. He's a predatory offense specialist, and he's coming to us today from Cincinnati, Mr. Adam Zarnowski. Hi, Adam. How are you today?
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
And thank you so much for joining us, because today's session, we're looking at sexual exploitation and trafficking awareness. And many people aren't even aware of the situations with sexual trafficking. And even hearing Mike today of his own father bringing him to sexual exploitation parties as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, people might be shocked. And a bit of today's session is bringing light to areas that aren't necessarily comfortable. It's given me goosebumps to share about this, and there's a vitality here as we bring the light to some of this darkness. And I applaud you for some of the work you're doing. I'd be very curious for you to share a little bit about your role and how did you get involved in this field?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Mike for speaking up about his experiences and how the abuse has affected him, as well as just being an overall great guy. I've gotten to know Mike, and he is just an amazing guy. But I first got involved in all this when I was 16. I stumbled upon essentially a human trafficking operation where children were being sent to these, essentially, they were called tough love boot camps for troubled teens. And parents would pay upwards of $40,000 thinking their kids were getting therapeutic treatment, where in reality, they're kids who may have only talked back to their parents, who may have only stayed out late, broken curfew. They were getting horribly abused by the individuals in these boot camps. They were being beaten, they were being raped, they were being sexually exploited, they were not being fed. It was really absolutely appalling. And one thing led to another. I got to college and sort of just this became my passion. I started working as an interfaith minister actually in college, and I became the guy to come to if you were sexually assaulted. And I started helping rape and sexual assault victims in my time in college. And so one thing led to another, and I just, this is what I've been doing since I was 16. I really don't know what else to do. I don't know what my life would look like if I wasn't helping people on this issue. So yeah, that's pretty much where I come from.
Share a little bit with our audience today about the statistics on human trafficking. Where does it occur mostly in North America? And perhaps share a little bit of the dark side of how rampant it is. I think that's one thing that when people go and look into the statistics in human trafficking, they can be shocked. And it's global. And it's not something that a lot of people want to talk about. We've had the privilege and honor to have a number of people involved in human trafficking here in Canada. The 401, one of our biggest highways, is the place it starts. And would you share a little bit of the dark side? Because we want people to have awareness today. That's a big part of actually making any progress is awareness. So please share some of those statistics, Adam.
Yeah, well, I kind of have to issue a disclaimer first because our statistics really do not capture the full scope of what's going on. They only capture a certain subset of the population. It does not capture what's going on in migrant populations. It does not capture what's going on in the elderly population, and elder abuse is human trafficking. That's occurring in nursing homes across the United States, in Canada, across the world. This is not just something that affects children. This is something that affects everybody. It's estimated that 1 in 200 people is a victim of human trafficking in the world today. I personally believe that number is much higher based upon what I've seen. The reality is this occurs in every community, no matter how rich or healthy your community may be. This is occurring in your backyard, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. I'm sorry, I'm kind of losing my train of thought. But this occurs everywhere. It occurs in hospitals, it occurs in hotels, it occurs in homes, and it could be occurring to somebody you know, and you will never know about it. And additionally, somebody you know could be a trafficker. And the fact is, we interact with traffickers and trafficking victims every day, all day. And we just don't know it because it's very difficult to tell when somebody is being trafficked. It's not like modern slavery is not like slavery was in 1800s. People are not kept in chains. The chains are more psychological and invisible. And that makes it much more difficult to detect. And so it's very difficult to investigate from a law enforcement perspective. But the one thing I recommend everybody do is go to slaveryfootprint.org and just learn how prevalent this issue is and how widespread the issue is and how much each of us contributes to it and what we're consuming in the foods we eat, in the clothes we wear, in the cars we drive, and just how dependent on slave labor we really are.
So that was slaveryfootprint.com, if anyone's curious, .org, and the degree of slavery, modern day slavery that's occurring. In your role as a predatory offense specialist, what's the hardest part of your job and what's the most rewarding?
I would say the hardest part of the job is we have spent decades talking about stranger danger. And the reality is strangers only account for maybe 10% of sexual exploitation cases. In reality, the threat always comes from where you're least expecting it and where you're least prepared to handle it. Especially when we're dealing with children. It's typically when a child is sexually abused, that the abuser is in over 50% of cases someone within the family, and that is something that people have a very hard time in accepting. They want it to be somebody out there. They want it to be the stranger offering candy from the van, and we just don't see that happening. Yes, we absolutely see it occurring over the internet, but that is still a small percentage of cases. Again, and most trafficking victims will tell you that their first pimp was their mother or father. Their first pimp was somebody they knew and trusted. And 30% of all childhood sexual abuse cases are perpetrated by another minor, by just a child that's older than the child that's being abused. So when you consider that, it makes the problem. It's very important to understand the reality of the problem, but it makes the problem much more difficult to combat. And so my advice is always, whenever a child tells you someone is abusing them, believe them. no matter how incredulous it may be, especially because predators rely on you to defend them and for you to say, "Oh no, you're just misinterpreting what they're doing." He would never do something like that. You're just misinterpreting what they're doing. I mean, we've seen that in the Larry Nassar case. Uh, the It wasn't Joe Paterno, but Joe Paterno protected the guy. We've seen that all over.
I want to just follow on that stream because you've given number one advice is believe the young one.
Yeah.
What would be 2 or 3 other things that you feel that citizens can do to eradicate trafficking?
First, we've already touched on a couple, is just become aware of the issue and how widespread it is. Another thing, do not purchase sexual services from anybody. If you're paying for sex, that person is most likely being trafficked in some form. Especially when it comes to prostitution, the rates of post-traumatic stress disorder amongst individuals who identify as prostitutes is the same as in those who identify as sex trafficking victims. Prostitution and sex trafficking are one and the same. And that's a horrible reality we have to come to terms with. And the other thing is know people's rights and stand up for other people. If you see somebody being mistreated, for God's sakes, stand up for them. And Mike is mentioning something really important. You have to understand what grooming is and how predators will isolate their victims and get them to start to trust their victims and slowly but surely push boundaries and get them to do small things before building up to larger things. Another thing we have to really understand is that a lot of criminal behavior is at its root the result of human trafficking. Most people are forced, defrauded, or coerced into doing crimes, that is the very definition of human trafficking.
Wow, that's fantastic insights, Adam, and I really appreciate it. I'm going to flip the same question over to Mike because I have a feeling Mike might have an add-on or a different perspective or something that can share about 2 or 3 things that we can do to eradicate trafficking or sexual abuse. Mike, I'll add that in there and get your insights.
Yes, first I want to say Adam is an amazing guy too. Adam mentioned grooming. I threw that into chat. That the people who abusers, not only men, they are women abusers as well. They groom their victims to the point where they normalize the abuse so that they don't even realize, the victim doesn't even realize they're being abused. They get it normalized. Oh, this is special because it's a special way to show affection. And if there's families involved, that they will groom the families as well. The Leaving Neverland documentary explained that so well, that it was not only the child who was groomed, but the parents to believe that this is all fine and that horribly inappropriate things are happening, it's fine. And that the child believes, oh, this is something special because we love each other. And for some of those victims, they weren't even able to call it abuse until I think one had a child and that child reached that same age. And then he realized, if someone did to my child what that guy did to me, oh, there would be hell to pay. And then it clicked. I was abused. Because it's so that grooming is so sly and sneaky about how they do that. And prevention, parents need to be aware. Oh, someone's paying extra special attention to my children. Oh, goodness. Well, that's why. Hey, they're volunteering to babysit. Oh, my gosh, that's so wonderful for free. Okay, bells need to go up. Okay, why are they doing that? What's in it for them? And and we see that over and over with scouts, with churches. So many perps will go to these organizations and then offend, and then the leadership says, "Oh well, fine, that's a one-time thing. We need more workers, so we'll send them over here, and they can hopefully behave themselves over here, but we won't tell anyone." And then they reoffend. Oh, let's move them somewhere else, and they do it again and again, and it's just so sad. And you see it with so many different organizations that they do this.
If I may add one quick thing onto Mike's comments, he is absolutely correct in saying that predators groom everyone around them. Thinking back to the Larry Nassar case, in which I'm really glad the victims in this case are now suing the FBI for their malfeasance in this case, because there were warning signs 20, 30 years before Nassar was prosecuted. Nassar actually had other medical professionals. He groomed the medical community around him into saying, yeah, what he's doing is okay. It's medically sound. I mean, and that's just astounding. And he even was able to convince cops and law enforcement that, yeah, this is medically appropriate, which the moment some medical expert on the subject who did not know him came in from the outside and looked at what he was doing, said, no, this is wildly inappropriate.
Let me interrupt you, Adam, and just give a 1 minute background on the Larry Nassar case, because some of our viewers may not have heard of it or aware of it. It was definitely big news in America because of the just incredible time that he was abusive to the athletes. Yet in a 1 minute capsule, could you share a little bit about it?
Yes. Larry Nassar was the essentially the team doctor for USA Gymnastics. And over a course of about 25 years, sexually abused a ton of female gymnasts from very early ages up until they were young adults. And these young gymnasts, they would complain, but nobody would really believe them until around 2017, after the FBI screwed up the case and it got a second look. In fact, I believe it was in 2002, one of the Team USA gymnasts at, I believe it was, I can't remember the location, they filed a police report, but the local police, they just did not look into it seriously enough. And it's really an alarming case of how he was able to groom and sexually abuse literally thousands of young women.
This idea of grooming to sexual abuse to trafficking, Mike, you're bringing a topic that, again, I haven't delved deeply into. Yet your statistics that you've shared in some of your previous talks is 1 of 4 women are abused, 1 of 6 men are abused, and Adam suggesting 1 in 200 people are trafficked. And if we bring in grooming into this discussion, the statistics would be 1 in 2. Like every other person has had experiences of some type of grooming or sexual abuse or some type of exposure to trafficking, and quite often perhaps not aware of it. And I guess that's the part of the discussion today is it is everywhere. What are some of the practical steps to highlight it, yet also not flashlight it, not like get out of total control so you don't have any life about even trusting anybody with your kids? So Mike, I'm going to ask you that question. What is that fine line, and what are either indicators yet also a sense of involvement where you're still able to live a full life?
Yes. I think one person said it really well. It's the ick factor, that especially as the victim, you may not think it's abuse, but did it feel icky? Especially because that's simple language that children can understand. Did something feel icky? Then it's probably wrong, and they were probably not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it was not safe. And that's kind of the fine line. Oh, this is nice, they're just friendly. And there's perfectly wonderful, safe people out there who are friendly, who are giving, who want to be a part of children's lives. And that's wonderful. There's different groups, scouting and so forth, that offer wonderful opportunities. But where does it move into ickiness? And if it starts moving into ickiness, that's when, yeah, it's wrong. And that's when you need to train children. Hey, if anything feels icky or not safe, tell. I'm a safe person. There's other safe people out there that you can tell. Make sure that they know that it's not something that they did wrong, that they need to be able to tell. And the sad thing is they've interviewed different abusers and to see especially why a lot of them target boys. And one of the themes was that boys don't tell. So they have such shame and guilt, especially because the male bodies physiologically react to touch. So they feel I must be a part of it because my body reacted. I had an erection, I had an orgasm. And so that means I gave permission. Or the offender will say, see, you like this. See, so you're a part of this. See, oh, you had one. Well, no, that means your body's saying it's okay. And using that against the child to believe that they are a part of it and then somehow giving permission. And that idea of shame and that they were somehow a part of it or encouraged this person to do it. And they'll use that against the perpetrator will use that against the victim as well. And yeah, it's just horrifying what they do.
I was going to ask you who's most at risk when we're talking about sexual abuse or trafficking. Would you be able to answer that question? Because what I'm getting a feeling that it can be your neighbor on your right, it could be your neighbor down the block, it could be your neighbor 5 miles to the south, it could be anywhere. And I have a feeling Adam's nodding his head there.
As Adam said, often it's family members. Sometimes, like, mom and dad are divorced, mom has a boyfriend, and the boyfriend, oh, go out shopping, I'll watch the kids, you're fine. And it turns out he's an abuser. And for me, it was my own father. That in my own story, my mom didn't even want children, and he kind of forced it. So then suddenly he had these children he could do what he wanted with. And so a lot of it's long con, where they will build and groom to the point where they get what they want. And so, yeah, it's just everywhere. And that's Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia, in the U.S. It's 1 in 4 females before the age of 18, and 1 in 6 males will be a victim of sexual assault or sexual abuse before the age of 18. And third world countries, it's even higher. They think 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 4, or 1 in 5 boys. And that's just who reports from the research. But they think both numbers are actually much higher because so many do not report, or they get groomed to the point they realize, oh no, I was a part of it. I gave permission. I allowed it to happen. So therefore it wasn't abuse. But chances are it was, because that's part of the grooming, to convince you that you're part of it.
Adam, what type of programs or training or awareness prevention types of approaches can be highlighted today for some of our listeners, for people who may be more curious about the state of affairs? What would be 1 or 2 of the top things that you'd like to share?
I have 2 big suggestions. One, we really need to do a better job, especially in the United States, but worldwide, of training police to identify trafficking. The statistics on this are appalling. Unfortunately, police receive absolutely no training whatsoever while they're in the academy on human trafficking. And when they get out, they only about 18% of all police in the United States receive any training whatsoever on human trafficking. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's all that good training. It could be maybe watching a 15-minute video and checking a box that, hey, I received this training. That's it. That's the amount of training they're receiving on this issue. And that's horrifying. It really does. That sort of explains why so many trafficking victims are arrested as compared to their traffickers. Hundreds of victims are arrested for every single trafficker we put in jail. The second thing, and this is going to get me in trouble in the United States, but we really need comprehensive sex education. There is a movement to prohibit this in schools to keep out of fear that gay and lesbian teachers are going to groom children. I've looked at the research. Those in the LGBT community do not groom or molest children at any greater rate than their heterosexual peers. And moreover, all the research, 30 years of research, shows that the better educated children are, and if they receive teaching at school on age appropriate sex ed, they are better prepared to report sexual abuse, and the amount of childhood sexual abuse actually decreases. And so does teen pregnancy and a whole lot of other health issues for children. It may not be politically convenient, but it saves our children's lives, and that's what we have to keep in mind.
Mike, I want to bring your insights into that discussion about education and perhaps educating police officers or educating young people at schools, educating parents. Is there something or a program that you're aware of or familiar with that has been successful or has shown some good statistics on being effective?
Specifically, no. But I know when the Scouts started looking into that, and I know my son and I were doing Scouts at the time, And they had like a little course where, okay, safe touch, not safe touch, and implementing rules that, yeah, no adult should be alone in a tent with a child that's not their own. And that, and churches as well, my own church, they trained all their volunteers to say, okay, this is safe, this is not safe, that you will never be in a room alone with a child. You can have two children, one adult, or two adults, one child. If it's other one-on-one, you better leave that room as an adult. So training the staff so that if anyone walks in and sees an adult and a child alone, that's wrong, just to further prevent stuff from happening. And I think as awareness is spreading, so many more organizations are taking this seriously and doing background checks on volunteers and setting up security. They have the little badges that are even at Sunday school. Everyone wears a little sticker badge, and you can't. The parent has a little wrist thing. If you don't have the wrist thing or you don't have a badge, you can't pick up the child. So extra security measures. So many churches are doing that. So and Scouts and other organizations, they're now taking it seriously and training their staff, their volunteers, that yeah, we need to set up rules, set up methods to educate children on body safety. That yeah, whatever is underneath that swimsuit, that's between you and mommy and daddy and doctor, safe people only, but no one else. That's your no touch, I think is one of the things. So all that education is so important, and groups are and organizations are taking this seriously finally.
I guess my next question is on Mike, the programs to get some help. You've been involved in different types of support groups. You've been involved. Share a little bit about the different types of support groups that you've been involved with, or even perhaps that you would love to see grow even more to assist men in the healing of sexual abuse or trafficking.
Certainly, and one of our Facebook viewers, Vishnu, asked about resilience, and that goes hand in hand with healing. There's so much research nowadays on what they call neuroplasticity. So any kind of injury to the brain, you can overcome it, and the brain is so malleable, the mind, that you can retrain your brain, retrain your mind to overcome any of these woundedness. The specialists on post-traumatic stress disorder, they're actually wanting to get rid of the D and replace it with an I for post-traumatic stress injury, because disorder sounds permanent, but injury, you can heal from an injury. And they're discovering that, yes, with the research on neuroplasticity, there's so many different treatment options now than just talk therapy. I know EMDR, eye movement desensitization training. I think I have the acronym mixed up there, but EMDR, rapid eye movement response, something like that. But it is what trauma-informed therapists use for clients who've experienced trauma, not necessarily sexual trauma, but any trauma, and they can rewire their brain. There's tons of other methods that are being brought to the forefront to help treat trauma victims. So it's a good time now to get help, because there's a lot more research. There's not just sharing your problems and talking about it, that you can actually find resilience and find support. The first group I went to is malesurvivor.org. That's the group that was mentioned in the Oprah special. And they have a huge forum. They've been in existence over a dozen years, and thousands of male survivors of childhood and adult sexual abuse have shared their stories, support one another, and find healing. That was what was so healing for me, was to realize there's other men and we have so much in common, so many similar, even weird things that you wouldn't think was associated with the abuse. that weird symptoms. And that's what I learned. I probably have PTSD and hypervigilance and all these things. It's like, oh, there's a name for that? Oh, okay. And oh, PTSD. What does that look like? And I researched it, and it's like, oh, well, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. Oh, okay. I probably have PTSD. And so I started to look for a trauma-informed therapist. So all those things, there's tons of research out there now. Support groups, they here in the US, I know an offshoot of Male Survivor is menhealing.org, and they offer in-person retreats for male survivors. That is wonderful. And I went to one, and it was just so profoundly healing to be with other men in person who've gone through this, and so freeing. And you feel so seen. It was just remarkable. They do wonderful work. Faith-based groups are out there. More general recovery groups. I know there's non-faith-based groups like Sexaholics Anonymous and so forth, because usually if you're a victim, chances are you act out sexually, and then there's usually sexual addictions as a result. So any of those Sex Addicts Anonymous, SAA, SA, and so forth. There's other 12-step groups. There's faith-based ones as well. Celebrate Recovery, Recovery Alive are two that I know that work with sexual addictions, men and women. And the group I'm now affiliated with, Husband Material, which is their main focus is on pornography addiction, but they really work with all kinds of sexual brokenness, and that including sexual abuse. So there's all these different avenues for healing that are out there. And I know especially the online groups like Husband Material, they're kind of international because they're web-based. So no matter where you are, there are options out there for healing.
Mike, that was a great list. I think we'll put a list of them down and invite any people who actually have some suggestions on expanding that list. I'm really grateful for that. I hope some people who might be hearing this for the first time to know that there are people out there, and there are groups out there, and the support groups out there that are committed to serving and assisting you on your journey. Adam, I'd flip the switch a little bit because I'm hearing that there's definitely a movement for people to serve people, so people helping people. On your side, is there, again, with the policing and the reinforcing, is there anything positive going on that side that you might be able to share that's directed towards Adam?
Well, unfortunately, it's a fight to get people to realize that we're needing more social services, we're needing more counseling, and we're needing society really to understand how critical mental health is. To build off of what Mike was saying, trauma is just trauma. When you experience psychological trauma, and especially the kind that leads to PTSD, it literally reshapes the brain, and it literally results in a physical injury to the brain. We've got to get better at understanding that. And speaking from my own traumatic experience, although I haven't experienced anything like Mike has, it is really astounding when you realize something that you've attributed to your personality turns out to be a symptom, to put it bluntly. And so, yeah, we really have to get information out there. And I am seeing more of a trend towards that. But at the same time, there's an awful lot of pushback towards hey, let's address some of the larger picture of what's going on behind the scenes instead of just bringing the hammer down on people when they do bad things. because a lot of people just want the hammer to the nail approach, as opposed to what we really need to do is understand what motivates people to do bad things in the first place. And a lot of time it's trauma. Looking at, I can remember, like, everybody remembers the Will Smith slap. Well, Will Smith is a trauma survivor. Chris Rock is a trauma survivor. That trauma motivated both individuals to do what they did there. And so when you take that perspective, it really changes how you approach situations. And we really need to take that perspective.
Thank you for that. Again, I guess Mike, that's a great list so far, and I'm really fantastic that there is more awareness, there's more conversation. I am curious on the trafficking side, because in Canada, I've been involved with a couple of organizations that are definitely working on the awareness and looking at the healing. And there is that component to embrace and engage the policing of it. And I guess I'm curious, maybe to either one of you, is there any movement or site or education that's going on in the policing component to, if you did observe or notice that there was some trafficking going on, do you just call the local police? Do you call a specific branch of the policing that will maybe do it? Yet we're seeing, again, from Adam's comment earlier about the Larry Nassar experiences, the FBI is being sued now. So there seems to be not as much progress being made on the policing component of sexual trafficking as opposed to perhaps the healing component that's going on to assist in the healing. Would you agree to that comment, or is there some positivity going on in the policing?
Yeah, I think, as Adam mentioned, I mean, they're not trained. They don't have much experience, and they don't know how to proceed, how to investigate. I know National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the U.S., they're very well trained, and they will connect you to resources. And I know there's snap.org. There's they work traditionally with Catholic priests, anyone who was abused by priests, but they've expanded to anyone who's been sexually abused or exploited by any kind of clergy or any kind of church leadership person. So they're a great resource as well. And a lot of these have, I know SNAP and some of the other organizations I mentioned earlier are international as well, that they have an international reach. So, but hopefully each country has similar anti-trafficking, anti-abuse organizations out there. I'm not that familiar with anything outside of the U.S. And there's not much in the U.S. I know they are good, and they would know who the best person is locally too. And same thing with SNAP. It's a network of attorneys who deal with abuse by clergy, and they will advise you on how to proceed.
Thank you, Mike. And Adam, we're getting to that point where it's about getting the magic wand. What would be one or two things that you would really like to see improve in the arena of overcoming sexual trafficking or any type of human trafficking?
I would like to see victims stop being blamed and stop being criminalized for their own victimization. Like I said earlier, it's not the traffickers or the pimps who go to jail. It's the victims. And that has got to stop. During raids, it's not the pimps who are arrested. It's the men, women, and children who are being prostituted. And a lot of police policy has to be reformed quite honestly. A common practice in American policing is that undercover officers can solicit sex and even sleep with prostitutes and then charge those individuals, and while being immune from prosecution themselves. That is not only horrendous, that is sick. Because not only do they get away with that, but they can use that to blackmail the individual and extort them by saying, "Hey, you're going to do this, or I'm going to arrest you and turn you in for prostitution." It's absolutely insane. And so that would be the biggest thing I would like to see changed, is that victims are no longer criminalized for their own victimization. But unfortunately, we have a very long way to go before that happens.
Thank you, Adam. And Mike, I'm curious on your perspective, Mike, is that do you want to add anything to what Adam just said about improving on the policing side, or improving on the healing side? And I believe there's an intersection somewhere there. I am not perfectly clear on it yet. What would be your, as we bring the session to a close, what would be a message that you would like to summarize what we've been discussing today?
I think systemic issues. So I know if someone is abused, then trying to get through the system of not only suing the individual, but then if you end up with court, okay, how is that victim then questioned, especially if it's a child? You don't want to re-traumatize them. And I know there was a model somewhere in New England that is a wonderful model that they they don't even put the child in the courtroom. It's all closed circuit TV, and it's like one individual, and people from both sides can ask questions, but they're able to tell the story and make it as less re-traumatizing to the child and honoring the child as much as possible, and making sure those systems are in place. That you hear so many horror stories of victim blaming, victim shaming, that what did you as an 8-year-old try to entice this adult into having sex with you, those kinds of things, and realizing, yeah, those are so inappropriate. And you hear the horror stories, so victims don't want to come forward. They don't want to prosecute because the system is built against them. And I think organizations like that group in New England, it's attorney-based, trying to rewrite how you approach these types of cases with children, to not re-victimize them, to not re-traumatize them, and make the system safe to report so that these perps don't get away with it, because most cases they do get away with it, unfortunately, and they know how to play the system and so forth. So system-wide, things need to be changed.
Well, gentlemen, both of you are doing incredible work in going to some of the systemic challenges. Both of you are demonstrating a authenticity and a curiosity and a compassion to make a positive impact. I'd like to thank both of you for joining us today on Unspoken Tears, Voice of Men 360. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. The list of organizations that we've been able to share today, I'm hoping that anyone who is looking for some help or assistance will get a bevy of resources that can assist them on their journey. And so on behalf of everyone here at Voice of Men 360, I'd like to thank you very much and wish you the very best on the continued journey of love and service. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Dave. Glad to be here.
you.